So as long as I think you're all set here, we have David Daleiden.
Is this good with the microphone? Okay, good. Well, thank you actually for that very appropriately direct and humble introduction. Oftentimes, I was joking to one of my Eastern Orthodox Christian friends earlier today, I feel like oftentimes there's a lot of undeserved hagiography that sometimes I'll get in some of these introductions, so it's nice to have it very short and to the point. And I know that we're maybe, about 15 minutes over time, so I will try and keep my remarks appropriately targeted to get us all out of here on time. Should I fail in my attempt to do that, I just want to let you all know up front right now that you can always go ahead and call the California Attorney General's office, and they'll be happy to send 11 jackbooted thugs to carry me off the stage. I brought with me today to the podium these two items. I brought a tomato and a potato because when a certain pro-life leader found out that I was going to be speaking here at the Pro-Life San Francisco conference, I actually got kind of a nasty email, sort of a nastygram from this person saying who took, I guess, offense at the idea that pro-life unity is one of the themes of this conference, and the line from the email was, David Daleiden talking about pro-life unity is like tomatoes talking about potatoes. And it made me laugh, and I wasn't really sure how to take that, and I thought about it for a second, and I thought, tomatoes and potatoes, and I said, well, actually, when I think about it, tomatoes, you crush them up and make a pasta sauce, so you make a ketchup, and potatoes, you deep fry them and you have French fries, and those go quite well with the tomato sauce, and they know quite a lot about each other. So I'm not really here to talk or try to be the Pope of the pro-life movement or talk about all the solutions for inter-movement unity and all these different things. I'm here to talk about what CMP does and what we've experienced. But I'm not here to try to say that everybody has to be a potato or everybody has to be a tomato. As far as pro-life unity, I would just say that I think that we can. I think that the ketchup and the French fries will go quite well together, each respecting what it does and what it's there for. So that's. So, for anyone who doesn't know, I'm David Daleiden. I'm the founder and project lead of the Center for Medical Progress. We are the organization who's responsible for the undercover videos from a couple of years ago of Planned Parenthood's top-level leadership callously negotiating the harvesting and sale of tiny aborted baby hearts, lungs, livers, and brains. Those videos now have over 13 million views on YouTube alone 3 years later, and they have dozens of millions of more views on other more traditional media. And just a couple of months after the videos came out, the board of directors of the George Soros Open Societies Foundation, there was actually a document that was leaked from one of their meetings. And in that document, the George Soros directors remarked that the videos have upended Planned Parenthood and that their long-term consequences involve the substantial eroding of Planned Parenthood's credibility and reputation. And I would like to play a little bit of those videos for you guys now.
Now a story we guarantee most of you have never heard before. Big money is being made from the sale of fetal body parts.
Even the most ardent pro-choice advocates, like Planned Parenthood President Gloria Felsh, are disturbed by what we find.
It seems inappropriate, totally inappropriate. Where there is wrongdoing, it should be prosecuted and should be brought to justice.
A lot of people want to attack marks these days. They're looking for specific notes. Investing. I was like, wow, I didn't even know. Good for them. Yes, it was the first time she said people wanted Congress, right? And then she felt like I've always been attacked for resistance.
Yeah, liberals.
Over 70s too. That's nice. I mean, that's, I don't know what we do for the
possible.
Yeah, but that one doesn't.
I'm the medical director for the national office.
Right.
So I say, okay, what are you looking to supply today? Because you get supplies lines over there. Every provider has had one of their reasons, and absolutely one of the times. They just want to do it in a way that's not perceived as slimming the selling, just letting you make money off of this. Okay, so when you are, or if your kid is yes, so that it doesn't create crazy pressure that this is what it's about. What do you guys would do?
You know, I would throw a number out, but I would say it's probably anywhere from $3,200 depending on the facility and what's involved.
The $3,200 price, that's per specimen that we're talking about, right? Yeah.
Yes,
The $3,200 price, that's per specimen that we're talking about, right? Yeah.
yes. And if they can do a little better than break even and do so in a way that, you know, seems reasonable, they're happy to do it.
How much of a difference can it actually make if you know what kind of what's expected or what we need versus?
It makes a huge difference. I'd say a lot of people want liver.
Mhm.
And for that reason, most providers are posting under ultrasound guidance, so they'll know where they're putting their forceps. Kind of rate limiting step of the procedure is Calvarium. The head is basically the biggest part. Most of the other stuff can be done.
Right.
It's very good. It doesn't have that dilation.
To bring the body cavity out and all that.
So then you just kind of pop this thing up where you do prosperous. We try to do attention right below the thorax so that, you know, the grades are getting prize lines over there. Because we know that so I'm not going to crush that part. I'm going to basically crush below and crush above and then just make it all intact. And with the Calvarium, in general, some people will actually try to change the presentation. So that's not a vertex. It's a vertex presentation. You never have enough dilation to finish your face unless you have a real huge amount of dilation to deliver an intact Calvarium. So if you do it starting with a brief presentation, the dilation that happens as the case comes out and often elastic, that is what we talk about. So I mean, there are certainly steps that can be taken.
So they can convert to breach, for example, and start with the
Exactly. And our ultrasound guidance that can change the presentation. Ultrasound guidance that can change the presentation.
to bring the body cavity out and all that.
So if you do it starting with a brief presentation, the dilation that happens as the case comes out and often elastic, that is what we talk about.
Federal abortion ban is a law, and laws are up to interpretation.
The Attorney General of the state of California, Javier Becerra, and the previous Attorney General before him, now U.S. Senator Kamala Harris, both agree that there's evidence of crime on these videotapes. Except Kamala Harris and Javier Becerra, as Attorneys General of the state of California, think that the crime is the fact that the videos were recorded and that these statements were documented for all of the world and all of history to see, not the actual fact of what's being said and what's being discussed on the videos. If you want to find out more about that, you can come to mine and Sandra's next court hearing over across the bay in San Francisco, 9 o'clock a.m. In San Francisco Superior Court on 850 Bryant Street. Teresa can give you more information on that.
What day?
Monday. This Monday. This Monday is coming Monday. I'm going to be out there for a while. So these videos have over 13 million views on YouTube alone, dozens of others of millions of views in more traditional media. These videos brought Planned Parenthood within one vote of being defunded of all of their taxpayer subsidies, just within one vote of being defunded in the US Senate. They prompted multiple full-spectrum, year-and-a-half long congressional investigations, one in the US Senate Judiciary Committee, the other done by the House Select Investigative Panel, a special Select Investigative Committee that was formed specifically to examine Planned Parenthood and their participation in the market for aborted baby body parts. Those two investigations each issued a final report at the end of 2016, early 2017. Hundreds of pages long, each of them, thousands of pages of documentation. They yielded about a dozen criminal and regulatory referrals for multiple Planned Parenthood offices around the country, as well as their business partners. And in December of last year, in December 2017, it was announced that the US Department of Justice and the FBI are following up on those criminal referrals, and Planned Parenthood and their business partners referred by the congressional committees are currently under federal criminal investigation. And that includes at least 5 of the biggest Planned Parenthood affiliates here in the state of California and their business partners that they work with to supply and harvest and sell aborted baby body parts for profit. Also in December of last year, December 8th, 2017, the District Attorney of Orange County in Southern California, where I'm from, announced that they had achieved a settlement agreement with the Da Vinci companies, who were 2 of Planned Parenthood's biggest and oldest partners in harvesting and selling baby body parts in Southern California. The Da Vinci companies admitted guilt for selling baby body parts against the law in the state of California. They were shut down completely by the Orange County DA in a $7.8 million settlement agreement, and the Orange County DA credited CMP's investigative journalism work with prompting the first successful prosecution of a node of Planned Parenthood's baby body parts. To make it relevant for us here in California, Planned Parenthood in California is basically the breadbasket and the practical capital for Planned Parenthood across the country. Planned Parenthood does approximately 60,000 abortions every year in the state of California. That's getting close to 50% of the total abortion number in California. 3 Planned Parenthood affiliates, 3 of the 7 Planned Parenthood affiliates in California do abortions for any reason electively up to 6 months. 2 or 3 of the others do them electively for any reason up to 5 months. And Planned Parenthood in the state of California, of course, opposes any restrictions or regulations or limitations on their abortion practice whatsoever. They oppress and persecute life-affirming pregnancy resource centers, like we have, some of whom we have represented here with us today. And Planned Parenthood in California, from their medical directors and their abortion providers, have also offered some of the expert testimony trying to keep partial birth abortion and other late-term abortion methods legal across the country. Planned Parenthood in California alone receives $250 million in taxpayer funding, so that's close to half of Planned Parenthood's total government funding nationwide is what they receive here in the state of California, even though the California Planned Parenthood is only seeing about 1/3 of the nationwide Planned Parenthood patient population. And in California, California is unique among maybe about 15, 16, or 17 states nationwide where Planned Parenthood can actually bill directly to the state Medi-Cal program for the abortion procedures that they do. And of course, in California, Planned Parenthood has been on the vanguard of selling baby body parts after the abortions for about 20 years at this point. Sadly, when we talk about the harvesting and sale of aborted baby body parts, there's sort of two models according to which it's happened in the past couple of decades. The first model is a very simple, kind of limited local version where you have the local Planned Parenthood clinic or the local surgical abortion clinic partnering with a local research laboratory or with a local university research laboratory, and that's something that you'll find at different times in different places across the country. And then we have what I like to call the California model. Sadly, the California model, which is something that was really originally established here in California and sort of been exported to other states, where you have this three-tiered model of baby body part sales, where you have the supplier, which is typically a large Planned Parenthood surgical abortion clinic. You have end users, which may be taxpayer-funded biotech researchers at the NIH or at the FDA. There's been some of that in the news recently, or private research foundations, or big university research labs. But then in the middle, you have these middleman companies like STEM Express, which is up here in Northern California, or Advanced Bioscience Resources, which is located not too far away over in Oakland. It's been operating for as long as I've been alive, since 1989, which means that the very first children that they carved out and sold like widgets on an assembly line would be my age today, if they'd not been killed by abortion and had their body parts sold like used parts from a car afterwards. But this is the California model of baby body part sales, where you have this three-tiered system of the Planned Parenthood abortion clinic as the supplier, the middleman wholesalers in the middle, and then you have the end user purchasers. And the money flows from the researchers to the middleman companies, and then from the middleman companies to the Planned Parenthood clinics. To give you just an illustration of really concretely how this works, this is a selection from the findings of the U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee's investigation, where they had tens of thousands of pages of primary source business documentation that they obtained from Planned Parenthood affiliates and their business partners like STEM Express and ABR and Novogenics. The Senate Judiciary Committee said one day in June of 2014, the Advanced Bioscience Resources technician obtained a 20-week-old fetus, a 5-month-old baby, at a Planned Parenthood Pacific Southwest clinic that's down in San Diego and Riverside. From that one fetus, ABR sold its brain to one customer for $325, both of its eyes for $325 each, so $650 total, just for the eyes, to a second customer. A portion of its liver for $325 to a third customer, its thymus for $325, and another second portion of liver for another $325 to a fourth customer, and its lung for $325 to a fifth customer. So from this single baby that ABR harvested at Planned Parenthood, either in Riverside or San Diego, they were able to yield a total of $2,275 just from that one abortion. The law in the state of California, and also on a federal level, is very clear. Fetal organs and body parts, just like adult or child or any other organs and body parts, are allowed to be donated, but nobody is supposed to be commercially vending human body parts for profit. Nobody is supposed to be either turning a profit on the sale of aborted baby body parts or adult body parts, nor is anyone supposed to be using and trading in human body parts as an independent unit of value. Because once you commodify human body parts that way, that's when you create incentive for bad things to happen and to look at people as just a sack of meat with extra supplies that you're going to be parting in and out, trading to meet your customer demand, as opposed to holistic human beings with their own purpose and dignity just for being who they are. This is the fees and services schedule, the most recent one that we have access to from Advanced Bioscience Resources, Planned Parenthood's oldest partner in selling baby body parts in the state of California. You will notice on this services schedule that there are separate charges. There's a separate charge for the actual body parts themselves, where the body parts are billed per specimen. And then there are separate charges broken out for all the different shipping and handling and processing and packaging of the body parts. So you may have seen in the state and federal laws, and you may have heard some of Planned Parenthood's talking points in the past couple of years, where they want to say, oh, all that money going back and forth, that was just for shipping, it was just for shipping and handling. We're not making money off of selling body parts, we're just getting reimbursed for our costs. Well, here's the cost reimbursement right down here at the bottom of the price list, okay? Here's where and you'll actually see this on the invoices from the middleman companies, broken out separately, where they charge separately for the FedEx shipping, separately for the FedEx packaging, but then they're still charging you hundreds of dollars for the body part itself. This gets even more intensified when you look at the difference between when a researcher is purchasing just one eyeball versus if you're purchasing both eyeballs from the same baby. Just imagine for me, you have the harvesting technician from either STEM Express or ABR or one of the other companies sitting in the pathology lab of the Planned Parenthood clinic. The dead baby is brought to them from the operating room, an 18-week, 19-week, 20-week fetus or later. The ABR technician, if they have an order for 2 eyeballs from the same customer, they pop one eyeball out, pop the other eyeball out. They're probably putting them in the same specimen cup. They're certainly shipping them in the same package. It's the same FedEx shipment being shipped overnight to the researcher wherever it's going. And yet they still charge double the specimen fee for the 2 eyeballs. I defy anybody to tell me that this is not prima facie evidence of the sale of baby body parts for valuable consideration in our state and in our country. This is another example of another invoice where you have the livers being sold, second trimester livers at 24 weeks, 6 months. These are from twins. These are 2 livers, one from each twin. They're being shipped in the same FedEx priority overnight delivery, $90 shipping reimbursement charge, and then you have a $220 specimen fee, a body parts price for each separate liver that's being ordered from those twins. This is an actual screenshot from an order form that the company STEM Express, which was founded in 2010, has been operating in the Sacramento area since then. This is an actual screenshot from a special members-only section of their website, customer-only login, where they had an order form that you could log in and you'd have a drop-down menu where you would select which part of the baby you wanted to order from STEM Express. They have everything listed here: brains, hearts, lungs, livers, testicles, kidneys, scalps, skin, whatever you want. Then they have another drop-down menu where they list off whatever gestational age you want at that time based on the clinics they were harvesting from. They could go anywhere from 4 weeks to 20 weeks. Then you choose from the radio dial button whether you want it to be, what kind of packaging and what kind of storage media you want it packaged in. You choose whether you want it to be FedEx overnight, FedEx priority brown, FedEx same-day delivery, a same-day courier if you're local. And that's STEM Express. This is the actual contract that STEM Express signed with Planned Parenthood Marmonte, which is a big multi-state Planned Parenthood affiliate based here in Northern California. They're named Mar, like the ocean, and Monte, like the mountains. They stretch from the Santa Cruz region of the Pacific up through San Jose, up through the East Bay, through the Central Valley, all the way through Sacramento, through into Reno, Nevada. So they're a multi-state affiliate, and they're actually the single biggest Planned Parenthood affiliate in the entire country. A Planned Parenthood affiliate is basically a regional grouping of Planned Parenthood clinics. And each Planned Parenthood affiliate, there's about 50 or so of them nationwide. And each of them is organized as its own corporation. It's got its own board of directors, its own CEO, its own medical director. So Planned Parenthood Marmonte is the single biggest Planned Parenthood affiliate in the entire country. They have an annual budget of about $100 million. So back when Planned Parenthood's national annual budget was about $1 billion, Planned Parenthood Marmonte was about 10% of the entire nationwide organization. So Planned Parenthood Marmonte was the ones that STEM Express decided to start working with when they were first founded back in 2010. This is the original contract they signed with and obtained by the congressional investigations. Its terms are chilling and appear to be illegal on their face. They say in the contract that the term product of conception, no pun intended, or POC, means any fetal organ. And then they say that Planned Parenthood will be paid by STEM Express $55 per fetal organ determined in the clinic to be usable. Now, $55 may not sound like a whole lot of money on its own, although people certainly go to jail and drug busts for less money, for selling things that are never to be marketed. But if you consider that Planned Parenthood Marmonte is the single biggest Planned Parenthood affiliate in the country, is doing up to 18,000 abortions every single year, if each abortion at Planned Parenthood Marmonte yielded just one usable fetal body part, then that would be close to $1 million every single year in extra revenue just for this single Planned Parenthood affiliate. So contracts like this are worth up to $1 million to Planned Parenthood. That's why when STEM Express exhibited at abortion industry trade shows and passed out flyers trying to get new Planned Parenthood clinics to work with them, trying to get new independent abortion clinics to work with them, this is an actual copy of an actual Planned Parenthood advertisement handed out to abortion clinics and the Planned Parenthood directors at a National Abortion Federation annual meeting. No less than 5 times in this brochure, STEM Express promises to the abortion clinics that it will be financially profitable, fiscally rewarding to your abortion clinic. You'll get financial profits, you will provide a financial benefit to your abortion clinic, and contribute to the fiscal growth of your own clinic if you work with STEM Express to supply aborted baby body parts. This document, this advertisement, was endorsed by Dr. Dorothy Ferguson, the Chief Medical Officer of Planned Parenthood Marmonte. This is just one example of a monthly invoice from Planned Parenthood Marmonte to STEM Express, where for just 1 month they bring in $11,000 based on the harvesting done at only three of their many clinics that were working with STEM Express. The harvesting technicians who would work for STEM Express would actually get paid a bonus by STEM Express based on the number of body parts that they could harvest, and based on the category of body parts, depending on which ones were more valuable. So they had category A, B, and C. Category A was the really valuable stuff like brains, hearts, livers, lungs, thymus. Category B is stuff that's not in quite as much demand, but still useful, like kidneys and ears and facial features. And then category C is different blood types. And this is the kind of market system that would ultimately yield an invoice like this. This is an example of STEM Express invoice for 4 intact fetal hearts, 18 to 24 weeks. You can see the hearts are all charged a different specimen charge of $595 per heart, and then all of that reimbursement, the legally allowable reimbursement for the so-called donation, that's at the bottom of the invoice here. This is the legal part, that's the criminal part up there. The Da Vinci companies that were operating for years and years in Southern California had similar invoices like this, where you have the $750 specimen charge for intact, fetal side-free, 5-month-old, fresh fetal brain. Then you have, this is the reimbursement down at the bottom. These are the kind of documents that the Orange County District Attorney ultimately filed civil charges against the Da Vinci companies for and shut them down. I mentioned that they admitted last December, they actually admitted their guilt in the $7.8 million settlement with the Orange County DA's office. When the case was filed in October of 2016, the Orange County District Attorney charged the Da Vinci companies that they obtained aborted fetus donations from Planned Parenthood and turned those donations into a profit-driven business. Just about a year later, the Da Vinci companies admitted in the settlement agreement, they admit that they unlawfully sold fetal tissue for valuable consideration in violation of California law. There's multiple violations that we're concerned about when we talk about the trafficking of aborted baby body parts. We're concerned about the sale of fetal body parts for profit and the commodification of our unborn brothers and sisters, and frankly, the commodification of women and couples in crisis pregnancy situations. We're concerned about HIPAA breaches. This is one of the key findings of the congressional investigations. They found that the companies like STEM Express were just being given open access to patient medical files at some of these giant Planned Parenthood mega clinics, where there is no medical reason whatsoever for the harvesting technicians to know the medical details of the patient, how pregnant she is, when her appointment time is, what her address is, what her medical history is, what kind of disease conditions or other things might be going on. There is no valid medical reason, there's no reason for patient treatment whatsoever for a harvesting company like STEM Express or ABR Novogenics to have access to that information. The only reason for STEM Express to get access to that information is it helps them meet their customer demand. That's another example of how Planned Parenthood has been a key partner and co-conspirator with these companies in the harvesting and sale of baby body parts. We're also concerned about fraudulent patient consent. The Orange County District Attorney's Office actually found that one of the early compliance officers for the Da Vinci companies had mentioned to Planned Parenthood Orange County, I think we should probably put something in the patient consent form about, quote, commercialization, letting the abortion patients know that the fetal tissue taken from them will be commercialized if they sign the form. Planned Parenthood refused to add that word to their form. We're also concerned about what you heard about the abortion methods being changed to get more saleable quality or more intact body parts, like you heard in the undercover video from the Senior Director of Medical Services at Planned Parenthood. We're concerned about battery against pregnant women, that these are procedures that are being done without any consent being signed for them. Because if the patient is consented to one procedure and then the doctor goes and does another in order to preserve the body parts, it's a battery against the patient. And then of course we're concerned about, in the most extreme case with the partial birth abortion that you heard described by Debna Kutola, we're concerned about partial birth abortions and born alive infant cases, because in all of these harvesting cases, no feticide can be used to kill the baby before the abortion is done. So, with all these different violations, with all the different evidence, and with the gravity of the issues involved, it's encouraging that at least some local law enforcement has already started to take a look at it, and there's been at least one successful prosecution brought by a local California law enforcement agency against Planned Parenthood's Baby Parts Network. We're still waiting on other law enforcement agencies, and we're still waiting to see what happens, and it's a little disappointing that it's been 3 years and there's only been one case. The one case has been good, but there should be a lot more, and it's sort of an open question. Why is that? And when I think about that, I think a lot about this quote from the Kermit Gosnell grand jury report. And those of you who will stick around for the film festival later this evening, you'll get to see the Kermit Gosnell film, which, in my opinion, is is the greatest film on abortion that's been made in the country yet by my friends Phelan McAleer and Ann McElney. You'll get to see that later this evening. But the Kermit Gosnell grand jury report that indicted Kermit Gosnell for infant murder in Philadelphia several years ago, they said about the fact, because remember, Gosnell's clinic was operating for 17 years in Philadelphia, and nobody did anything, and they wanted to know why. And the grand jury said, bureaucratic inertia is not exactly news. We understand that. But we think this was something more. We think the reason no one acted is because the women in question were poor and of color, because the victims were infants without identities, and because the subject was the political football of abortion. This is a quote that I come back to again and again and again when I think about what kind of law enforcement response really ought to be expected by the crimes and by the violations against our unborn brothers and sisters and their families and their parents that are being documented both by the undercover videos and also by the congressional findings. It's something that I come back to a lot, but I also think that there's one more piece. I think and a question that I've gotten a lot over the past 3 years is companies like Stat Express, companies like ABR, Planned Parenthood affiliates like Planned Parenthood Mermonte, Planned Parenthood Pacific Southwest. I think my microphone is slipping a little bit. People have asked me this question for the past 3 years. How is it that this could be going on for so long, so latently, when you look at the invoices and they're charging for multiple body parts and there's just one reimbursement for the packaging? How is it that that goes on for so long and nobody does anything? And in part, I think it's the Kermit Gosnell explanation because of the nature of the crimes. And in part, I also think it's because these entities for so long, especially sadly in our state, have thought that they were never going to get caught. And why is that? And what is it about California that makes it the de facto capital of the abortion industry nationwide, that makes it the de facto capital of Planned Parenthood nationwide? And so this is the final thing sort of really focused on our purposes here today in California that I wanted to leave you guys with, is a couple of insights that CMP's been able to generate from some message testing and focus group work that we've done over the past couple of years. CMP actually commissioned a series of focus groups through the polling company or Women Trend, which was Kellyanne Conway's organization before she joined the White House. And these were a series of focus groups that were done looking at very moderate, apolitical, not strongly pro-life or pro-choice individuals, just sort of a general cross-section of the areas where we're going to do opinion testing. People who, just a cross-section of all socioeconomic, racial backgrounds, religious backgrounds, but very moderate, apolitical. We wanted to really look at the middle and sort of the bellwether people about these issues. We did 2 in Denver, Colorado. One was a control group, and one was a group on that we call Pro-Choice Light. women, so women who had sort of a very moderate, not even like a moderate pro-choice position, just what we called it light, like it was sort of there, but not really, not very developed. And then we did a series of focus groups in California 2 years ago, 2 in Sacramento and 2 in Los Angeles. In Sacramento, we had a control group and a group of female professionals. And in Los Angeles, we had a control group and a Hispanic Latino group. And the goal of doing the California groups was to really try and surface greater insight and more in-depth insight into how do Californians think about abortion policy, and think about pro-life issues. And it was really fascinating to see the contrast that we got between the California groups and and remember, these are all moderate, apolitical, not strongly pro-life or pro-choice individuals, but even just within those parameters, the contrast that we had between California and Colorado. Some of the things we noticed is that, first of all, in California, even among the moderates and the middle, there was a far greater comfort with first trimester abortion for any reason electively in California than there was in Colorado. We would ask people in Colorado, do you consider yourself pro-life or pro-choice, and what do you think about abortion? And in Colorado, these are focus groups of about a dozen people in each case. And in Colorado, what we would hear from people is they would say, gosh, abortion, that's a really sad subject. It's really tough. I think it's killing a baby. I think it really should only be legal in cases of rape, incest, or life of the mother, and that's why I'm pro-choice. And that's what they would say in Colorado. And then another person next to them in Colorado would say, gosh, I really agree with that. I think abortion's really sad, it's really tough, it's killing a baby. Should really only be allowed in the case of rape, incest, or life of the mother, and that's why I'm pro-life. And so the labels didn't really matter in Colorado, but there was a very predictable general consensus of anywhere to 60 to 80% of these people, these moderate apolitical cross-section of Denver, who would take that position. Whereas when we tried the same thing in California, in both Los Angeles and in Colorado, both the controls and the special groups that we were looking at, in California, what we heard is across the board, people would say, abortion controversial, tough. Because it really shouldn't be used as birth control. You really should get it done within the first trimester. And they didn't want any restriction in the first trimester. And that was sort of the consensus, just baseline, that we had in California. So very few of our California moderates in these groups would take what would maybe be described as a broadly pro-life stance. And there were far, far more personal abortion narratives that came up in the California groups as well than what we had in Colorado. In the Colorado groups, out of 12 people, we would see maybe 2 people in the groups would spontaneously bring up, I had an issue with this pregnancy and I had an abortion many years ago, or my friend, or if it's a guy, he'd say, my girlfriend 20 years ago. Maybe two out of every 12 is what we had in Colorado. In California, easily half of every focus group. Half of every focus group, somebody had a direct personal abortion story that spontaneously came up in the focus groups. In sharing those stories, and even just in talking about abortion from an outsider standpoint, the California answers were much more emotionally charged than in Colorado. In the California groups, abortion was discussed as something that was deeply, deeply anchored in the personal. In Colorado, we pretty consistently heard from people, they looked at abortion from an outside perspective, and they're either looking at it as a highly charged political issue or a highly charged religious issue, but in both cases it was from the outside looking in. In California, people were saying, we don't like to even think about this as a religious or spiritual or political issue. This is something so personal and something that everybody has experience with, and we don't really talk about it because it's so personal. The remarks in Colorado tended to be very structured and sort of analytical, coming from this outsider perspective, recognizing that it's highly controversial, highly charged, oh gosh, religion, politics, a deadly mix. But it was from this sort of outside looking in perspective in Colorado, whereas in California, the associations and the themes that would come up spontaneously were often very dark, very personal, and oftentimes very broken, with not a lot of clear solutions. We were seeing a lot of hard life experiences, a lot of brokenness, and even some cynicism just in general about discussing serious issues. And the third big thing that we noticed was that in California, even when someone in the group would voice some distinct pro-life sentiments, they were very, very quick to surrender those pro-life sentiments to sort of the group pro-choice consensus. And they didn't really want to be the odd man out or be someone who was too different from what the consensus social viewpoint was. This is just an example of the associations that came up in the very first focus group that we did. This is in Sacramento, and the moderator would ask, so when abortion comes to your mind, what's the first thing that you associate with? What's the first thing you write down? The first 3 or 4 people who spoke up in Sacramento all said death. In Colorado, by contrast, in Colorado, we heard selfishness a lot. We heard a sort of value judgment about the procedure. In California, we just heard this existential cry, kind of. We also, in California, we saw a lot of this personal choice framing, where the Californians in the focus groups were very, very uncomfortable with being in a position where they would either be telling somebody what to think or what to do, or even the whole point of the focus group, right, is we're asking you, tell us, what do you think about this? How do you make your judgments about it? How do your values weigh out in it? And the Californians were very, very uncomfortable with this way of thinking about abortion. We heard from one of the control groups in Los Angeles, I don't think this should be a political issue or a religious issue. We heard then from a female in that same control group saying, you're saying to the moderator, you're monitoring us on this abortion discussion, but in real life, who is the moderator? Then everybody starts arguing about it, and it doesn't change anybody's view, and what changes your view on abortion is when you go through it and your sister goes through it, and this guy goes through it with this woman, and that's what changes an opinion, and that is what has happened to me. I am 53, and I have changed my opinion 4 times in my life by what has happened to me. We also heard, similar to the personal pro-choice frame, we heard a lot of hesitancy. Like I said, hesitancy to identify as pro-life, or hesitancy to come down with a firm position or a firm value judgment. A lot of people, even when there are pro-life sentiments, not wanting to deviate from the group sentiment. This was someone in Sacramento who said, "So I am pro-choice. My personal choice is pro-life. As far as in regards to myself, I have 3 beautiful babies, and my pro-choice has always been pro-life because I, for my personal reasons, wouldn't get an abortion. But however, anyone else in this room or anybody else, my decision would be pro-choice because I think it's up to each and every individual, their situation and their beliefs." Another lady in the Los Angeles control group said, "Unless it's rewritten, pro-life means, from what I understand, no matter what, you can't have an abortion. You can't if you're dying. That's why there are more people that fall into the pro-choice, although there are 10 different definitions of pro-choice. I believe in pro-choice and pro-life, but if I have to pick one, I have to go choice, because it depends on the situation. I don't think pro-life has been written that way. It's just the definition of it." And then as we started to explore this theme a little bit more in the Sacramento group, and we were trying to flesh out, what is pro-choice for, does pro-choice for you mean the same thing as Planned Parenthood, 3 affiliates doing elective abortions up to 6 months, selling the body parts afterwards, stuff like that. There was one sort of libertarian-minded person in the Sacramento group who said, "Oh, well, we're not really pro-choice," is kind of what you're getting at to the moderator. But it was only sort of towards the very end that came up. Like I said, we saw a lot of personal narratives in California coming up, orders of magnitude greater than what we were seeing in Colorado. One of the most interesting discussions was when we talked about, we started asking specifically about the situation in California. California's abortion rate is 1/3 higher than the national abortion rate. And we wanted to hear from our focus groups in California, why do you think that is? What's so different about California that our abortion rate is just skyrocketing over the national rate? One of our LA control groups said, "I would attribute it to lifestyle differences in the different states. California people are more about themselves, more self-centered or profession-driven. They're not ready to have kids." And one thing that occurred to me as I was sitting there watching this, and as I've thought about it a lot over the past couple of years, it seems to me, based on a lot of these comments, that if Californians see abortion primarily through a personal lens, if abortion is really for Californians, for just middle of the road, average, moderate Californians, if abortion is totally prescinded from a religious issue or a spiritual issue or a political issue or even a cultural issue. It's seen primarily as this deeply personal issue. Then the personal abortion history of Californians is necessarily going to be a primary influence and probably the primary influence on abortion policies and attitudes in California. We also heard from another member of the control group in Los Angeles. Most of my friends have had abortions when we were younger. All the bikini thing and trying to get the figure, and it was a mistake, but everybody else was doing it. It is a matter of growing up in it, and growing up in it, it's okay. That's why we have more abortions in California. I was raised strict Catholic too, but I'm saying I feel like being a woman of Southern California, that's what it is. It is accepted and it was easy. I don't know if I'm making any sense. It's freer, especially in the Hollywood thing. Everything goes in certain areas. That's just what I'm thinking. As we started to talk about these personal narratives with the Californians and the focus groups, we started to get into even more detailed family narratives. And this was really, I think, in the midst of a lot of the Sturm and Drang and kind of existential stuff that was coming up, this was actually the moment where it was like some clarity broke through. Because we started asking our control groups, which had a really significant cross-section of different races represented. We asked them, okay, nationwide, you break down the abortion rates by race, and the white abortion rate in America is 7.7 abortions per 1,000 women of reproductive age. The Hispanic rate is double that, 15, and the black rate is almost 28 per 1,000 women. And we asked them, why is this? Why is there? So we talked about like the state-by-state disparity. Then we have this wild racial disparity in the state of California and across the country in abortion rates. Why is that? And these participants, you see these quotes from, these are all men. Almost every single, these are almost all black men in the Los Angeles control group. Participant 1 said, you know, this freaked him out. This made him upset. He said, you know, we're talking about personal choice and this and that, but at the same time, why is it 7.7% for the white abortion rate, but blacks are up in the 20s? And the next guy said, well, you know, white people have a mother and father, and so do Mexicans, but blacks don't. Fathers aren't there. The third guy to chime in said, well, you've got a high incidence of black fathers that are incarcerated, so the family structure is different. And while you may not notice it, us everybody at the dinner table, but there's a substantial gain to the family sitting down and having dinner together. And then a fourth guy chimed in, and he said, well, you know, it's hard to say why those numbers are what they are, but it has something to do with the community, the education, and the family structure. How people are taught what is okay and what is not okay, what the norms are. And then right after, the women in the group started wanting to say something, and so then the fifth person to say, well, you might graduate high school, but when you get a white community, it's like, you need to be a CEO, and they have higher expectations. That's the reason so many girls get pregnant. They're like, it's okay because my peers are doing it, and it's okay if I get an abortion. And then a sixth person said, well, it comes down to family, how you were brought up and raised and where you lived. And these are just a few selections of the explanations and just the kind of talking it out that spontaneously came up in these narratives in that part of the Los Angeles focus group. And these bare quotes on a PowerPoint slide don't do it justice, but after this, about 15 minutes of discussing this particular part of the family dynamics and family brokenness and community expectations and how that's different depending on how the system affected you, there was a palpable release in the room. It was like everybody who had all sort of shared this around the table, they all sort of sighed collectively and kind of all let it out. And for the first time in this focus group, it was like they didn't necessarily have a solution, but they at least had some clarity because they were all sharing that same experience and that same sort of perspective and reflection on what the explanation for these kind of startling statistics and startling numbers were. So all of this suggests to me a couple of California-specific takeaways that take or leave them as they maybe speak to you or resonate with some of what we've heard in some of the other presentations today. But my first takeaway is that for promoting a culture of life in California and for affecting California abortion policy, we need courage and we also need common identification. You need the courage for people to feel like it's okay to break the silence and break from the current of the commonplace politically correct narrative on abortion in California. And you also need a certain amount of common identification with everyday Californians so that you can encourage their own pro-life sentiments and encourage them to adopt a pro-life identity. Number two, we also need to have attunement to the personal history dimension. That abortion politics in California, I think, I'm not an expert, but based on what we saw, I strongly suspect that abortion politics in California might be less about persuasion and more about healing for everyday Californians and the stuff that we've been through and the stuff that our families have passed on from generation to generation. And then number three, I do think that there's a big role for exposing the choice framework or the personal choice framework. Because when you have these companies like STEM Express who are loitering around like Igor in either the back of the Planned Parenthood clinic or in the front of the waiting room sometimes, waiting for that patient that they've been eyeballing in the medical records all week to come in with that 18-week healthy baby that they know they need to meet their orders, their quotas for that week. You have an indigent mother who's coerced, who's pressured, who's tricked by a consent form that Planned Parenthood refused to add the word commercialization to. Something like that, who's coerced to have a late-term abortion so that body parts can be sold for $20,000. Who's really making a choice in this situation? Certainly the baby's not making a choice and the patient isn't making a fully informed choice, but there's a lot of very serious and very driven and incentivized choices that are being made by the abortion clinic, by the abortion doctor, and by the harvesting company that's stationed there embedded in the clinic. And by the way, this is based on a real story. This is something I was told very early on in CMP's undercover work in 2013 by a whistleblower from the company STEM Express, someone who used to work in the STEM Express laboratory, who said that one of the most disturbing cases they ever had was from the Sacramento Planned Parenthood clinic on B Street, a woman who was 19 weeks pregnant, and they harvested the liver from that 19-week baby. Liver was shipped straight back to was driven, couriered straight back to the STEM Express laboratory in Placerville. They pulled all the stem cells that were the most valuable out of that liver, put it in a vial, and they sold that vial to a taxpayer-funded company in California for $20,000. And so you can imagine, for a poor woman or a poor couple living in Sacramento who's maybe trying to pay rent, who wants to know about groceries, who doesn't know about baby supplies, $20,000, for 1 year, that could be half of somebody's paycheck for an entire year. That could be enough for somebody who's on the brink to pull them back from feeling like I have to go through with this or no, I can have this baby. But in the current system, it was more valuable for taxpayer-funded researchers to pay $20,000 to be sure they got the cells from that liver than to be sure that that baby could grow up and be a contributing member of society and thrive and be part of the community. And so the way that the system and the way that our policies are structured, especially here in the state of California, means that those kids are literally more valuable dead than alive. And I think it's unconscionable that it's 2018 and we still have to have discussions like that. So thank you all so much for listening to me. I know we're a little bit over time. Thank you all for coming here today. UC Berkeley has been the site of a lot of really, really great informative pro-life conferences for me and for a lot of other people over the years. It's very special to kind of come here again and do this with all of you. Thank you for your courage. Thank you for your attention. And if we're faithful, if we work together, I'm sure that we'll soon see a day when there's no longer a price tag put on human life. Thank you.